So Lara, today is 3rd of July 2026. We're just one day from America 250th anniversary.
Yep.
Birthday.
Yes.
And so we sort of kind of do a few episodes. I mean, this show we kind of have been a little bit America-centric in some of our approach because we always believe, right, that America and Malaysia are very similar. Both are rainbow nations with multicultural challenges, all the pros and cons. So I think we want to do a couple of episodes on this, but today I think we want to kind of talk generally about America and how people in Malaysia have how they kind of process. I think in recent time there's a lot of news because of like Anwar Ibrahim being the ASEAN chair, and then all the tariff with Trump coming. I find more and more of my friends who are not usually interested in politics start to even pay attention. And somebody was even telling me, and this guy was never interested in American politics, and say, oh, come the November election, Trump might lose badly, that kind of thing. So I just find it interesting that people are paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there are a bit more awareness. I think ever since you have how President Trump just literally bombed the hell out of Iran, and I think that really just sort of caused the whole world to just pay attention to America. But it was until the part where I think a lot of people couldn't comprehend how Trump was just being. Actually, he's a very straightforward guy, but he doesn't reveal his card too early as well. So he still reserved that Trump card, and especially with the blockade in Iran, I think that's when a lot of people, you either hate him or you love him.
Yeah, the blockade, and before that, I remember Venezuela and Liberation Day with tariff. All the things that people say cannot work, but somehow he find a way to work. And look at crude oil price is coming down. Of course, the economy will take time to recover. But let's talk about the influence of America on the world, which is undeniable. But yet at the same time, do you feel like in this part of the world, in Malaysia, there's a lot of mocking, a lot of Yankees joke and things like that, and yet so many things we use, like what is the latest craze? Is all the AI, right? Look at who is leading the AI war. Of course, some people will say China and things like that, but those in the know that all the leading firms are the American firm. So their influence in every sector is undeniable.
Exactly. I've been recently just using a lot of Claude on the work, and I really find it so interesting. You just give a bit of prompt and things like that, and literally it could do what any other normal AI could do. It's just like it goes beyond your wildest imagination, and if you could just kind of train it, I think they are definitely the pioneers in this area.
Now later on we'll talk about the American government system, which really I think if we look at the history, they really started from the point view of freedom because they were fighting the British, and that climate, of course they went through a lot of challenges with civil war and things like that, but I think a lot of people, if they don't study the American history, the 50 years after Lincoln, after civil war, was where America became the industrial superpower. But why did that happen? One of the things is really the freedom that is afforded to the citizens. So that would be this is the current debate right now, right? Because you get a lot of a pro-China point of view, which is legitimate also, and they were saying, look, China's economy is well, we go to Shanghai, look at all the infra and things like that. So you have legitimate point, but then it is basically two contrasting system. But back to the influence of America, remember I was just telling you that even when Lee Kuan Yew was around, and he would say that he doesn't trust the Yankees, and you kind of get that because Malaysia, Singapore, we are very British centric. All our elites are British educated, and you feel like there is a bit of okay, I want to use the word rivalry, but it's kind of like a joke, right? United Kingdom is not a rival to US, not by any measure now,
Yeah.
But you find that kind of elitist point of view.
Yeah, definitely. I think because here we are still very much into the monarchy, although it's just a ceremonial monarchy that we are having here. It's still pretty much, I guess, it's a bit oxymoron that I felt, because on one hand you're a bit like anti-colonial sort of mentality, and yet on the other hand you're like bowing down to the king. So I felt like it's a bit of that sort of you do the exact same thing that you preach to dislike. So I felt like we're still very much at that sort of state and phase where I guess we're just trying to figure out our own identity for this nation. And you could go down the pathway of how Britain is now today, and even with Keir Starmer's resignation and things like that. I mean, the nation could not be at a worse state than what it is now, because of all those, like the sort of posture that I have been doing to welcome like many people who do not even believe their own culture. So I felt like there is that part, and there is also another part where there's like tremendous amount of freedom that you experience in the United States. I think it's when you so long for power, I think especially our leadership here, that you cannot begin to comprehend how would it be like when people have a lot of freedom.
Yeah, I remember this one guy. I think he is a government, like kind of religious. I can't remember his name now. He is like kind of working in Australia and with NGO and things like that. Then he moved to US for a couple of years, and now finally he's back to Australia again. And he was just kind of commenting, from an Australian point of view, you cannot even begin to compare the liberty you have there and here. And of course, Australia, I mean, people think Australia is very free, but actually it's like a nanny state kind of thing. It's like a more refined socialist system. But the other thing which you mentioned, which is very interesting, is really the anti-colonial mindset. And that kind of tie together with how people always criticize America by being, it's like America is the only nation who dropped nuclear bomb and is the only nation to use military intervention. But I think somebody, I think Critical Spectator in his blog was kind of replying to people who say, look, if US didn't drop the atomic bomb, you will all be speaking Japanese today. So, I mean, it's like kind of mockingly true, right?
True.
So then of course, the thing about all the, why they're involved with war, fight the Somali pirates and things like that, is because that's their way to protect the international commerce, which is basically the lifeline of their economy. Very similar to how the British Navy had supremacy during the 19th and 20th century. But what else do you think fuels this kind of negative mindset? That the rise of Trump and MAGA?
Definitely. I mean, more and more, you're seeing a lot of TDS. I mean, Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
I think it's
cannot be cured, right?
it's very hard. I think unless you really have a very the sort of humility and repentant heart to just like
repentant.
I mean, seriously. I mean, because I guess it's kind of interesting, because there are some people in the States where they are very, very liberal, and they just felt like, hey, I mean, I could agree with some of these things. I mean, I don't want an uncontrollable immigration policy where I just get any and everyone just come into the house, and I don't feel safe in my own country. I mean, that should be like the basic safety that you afford to your people. And yet, I think a lot of people are just like, hey, I mean, but US is like just a country that is made out of immigrants. So why are you so now pedantic about immigrants? So I felt like there's a lot of lack of understanding, a lot of ignorance on our part when we fail to understand that, hey, I mean, essentially every country will protect their own border. So what is wrong with United States protecting their own border?
And which is very interesting, because as we approach this 250th anniversary, remember the Supreme Court just ruled on the birthright case, which we're going to cover in subsequent episode. But that kind of goes into the very heart of what makes a nation, right? What qualifies you as a citizen? I mean, look at Malaysia. It is so difficult to become a citizen. Even if one of your parents are Malaysian, it still doesn't automatically grant you, certain circumstances can disqualify you. But somehow when it comes to America, everyone is like, hey, it's a free game. It's like there's no free lunch all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, we'll cover that case. Now, the other thing, of course, is, we talk about Trump and MAGA. We cover that very frequently in this show. It is really a lot of things that Trump has been doing is now proven right? I mean, look at Europe now. They're having a heat wave, and government is saying you cannot use AC and things like that. I mean, it's like so crazy. Europe has an energy crisis, not only a migration crisis. There is a reason why they are totally out of the AI game. AI game only left US and China because they have energy. And remember when Trump came back, second time, even first time he did that, drill baby drill. You need to have energy independence. And so do you think, okay, we're going to have one more point here, then we'll move to the next one. Do you think because of the success they have with all the startup, all the company, there's just that green eyes there, people are jealous and they are not happy that America, being such a young nation, can do so well, very much like how people don't like Israel?
Yeah, definitely. I think, especially even if you see how when SpaceX, when they had IPO and Elon Musk just became the first trillionaire, you see so many backlash. It's like, what can you do with that sort of money? I mean, you could just feed the whole, like a lot of
Yeah.
nations. So I felt like there's a lot of that sort of. I guess it's like you felt. I guess in a lot of sense, when you are having certain hardship in your nation, and you just felt like, hey, it's unfair. But why is it unfair? I mean, for someone to enjoy that sort of wealth when he worked hard for it. I mean, he would basically do rounds and things like that. So I felt like people just felt like I deserve this, I deserve that. So there's a lot of that sort of entitlement mindset. So I felt like that is also being very much amplified. I mean, if we're not careful and we just basically just think we are entitled to all sorts of social welfare, then we are heading the wrong way.
And the recent primaries in New York, I think it's showing that, like the socialist candidates. I mean, we're talking about within Democratic Party itself. The socialist candidate are having 20, 30 points victory over the conventional, traditional Democrats, who are already leftists, by the way. But the socialists is basically, they are militant socialists. So these are the battles going into the future. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is really, just very briefly, is what is the unique point about their government? Because I remember, like, when I study law, we study the government system, and when it comes to America, the British commentary will be like, yeah, they copy us and they produce an inferior version. But there was something really unique happened 250 years ago, right? When less than 50 of them signed a Declaration of Independence, which basically amounts to treason. I think every single one of them could be hanged. And I mean, of course, the history is very, very complex, but there's definitely the Christian element. There's definitely the pilgrim element. I'm talking about the original states, the colonies. Then, of course, later on, they had to deal with the indigenous and migrants. But before all this issue, these are people basically trying to leave Europe because there was so much religious persecution. Remember that the Catholics and the Protestants were having their war, and it led to civil war in United Kingdom and things like that. So what's the thing that we only have a bit of time here, not too much. What's the thing that kind of strike you, in terms of we talk about the government system so often, every time we want to look at the Supreme Court or the Senate process. What is the one or two things that really caught your attention in terms of their system?
I think, first of all, they do have definitely faith in God. And I felt like it's very unique in the sense that, here, you have a lot of nations that are pushing for theocratic rule, leadership, and yet you have another country that is basically openly professing their faith in God. But there is like so much freedom and uniqueness in treating people equal, because everyone is equal in the eyes of God, in the sense that you have equal access to human rights. So I felt like that part, they really, really do practice a lot of self-restraint, because it's not just so much on imposing the rule of religion upon their citizen. I think it goes beyond that because everyone has to experience their own faith and things like that. So I just felt like that part is just so uniquely different because I think that's where it's also very similar to Malaysia in the sense that we have a lot of people who are professing different faith, and yet there is a danger if we're not careful and we could just go towards a certain pathway where there is like more control than what it is intended. So I felt like there is a lot of freedom, and they really, really, really do just profess like a lot of freedom, and you can do this, but so long it's lawful.
Yeah, and the other thing which I think a lot of people find it very surprising is, the technical description of America is actually not a democracy. It is a constitutional republic. So what that means is you have a constitution that cannot be easily overridden even by majority, because we have this thing called the tyranny of majority. So imagine, like Malaysia, we're going to experience that. If you're going to change government, and every time you have a government, it may not even be like the days of huge landslide, huge majorities are gone. So let's say you have a majority, 5 to 10 seats, enough to form government, but not like super comfortable. You cannot be changing the rule of law that affects the fabric of the nation. So the founders of America understood this, so that's why they have a written constitution which protects the right that even majority cannot simply change that. So of course, it takes time to evolve, and people want to, the whole critical race theory wants to say that people like Washington, Jefferson, they were all racist and things like. Nobody is saying that they are perfect, but they started somewhere. And Jefferson, in his genius in drafting the Declaration, basically, he was not even a very religious kind of person. Obviously, they all are affected by the Christian faith, but Jefferson famously said, like he believes in everything in the Bible except the supernatural part. So he's like a philosophical kind of believer, but he wrote that all men were created equal. So they believe that the right to govern derive from someone higher. So if you look at the language, I think we'll do one episode on the language of the Declaration of Independence. Really, they behave like a steward. They don't behave like my government. So like here we say, what, remember when we look at Bridget Welsh 5 model, one model is my government.
Exactly.
Talking about people like Najib, like that, just treat the resources like their own. So I just find it very interesting because everyone wants to be king, but when they won the war and everyone wanted Washington to be the emperor, because they were like, hey, because French Revolution was kind of happening soon after, and Washington reportedly was offered 3 times by majority of Congress, and he said no. And after 2 terms, and there wasn't even a law to say that you cannot serve beyond 2nd term, but he kind of imposed it on himself and say, let other people do it. So to me, the uniqueness is just a constitution that protects the right of non-majority, and just so much restraint shown by the original founders.
Yeah, it's definitely there is like a huge amount of conviction on their part to be like great stewards of the governmental rule that was afforded them.
And no doubt they learned. It was adopted from the British system, yes, and in fact in the Constitution, very interestingly, that Supreme Court was mentioned like maybe once or twice. It's not so significant, but over the years, the Supreme Court kind of gave themselves the authority. Like who says Supreme Court can interpret the law? We. So it's kind of like funny, right? But of course, the Supreme Court was but Supreme Court can be wrong. Remember like just right before the Civil War, the Supreme Court actually ruled that the black, those days they call them Negro, doesn't have citizenship. And Lincoln is just like, well, we'll just have to make sure that change. So that's why when we talk about the birthright case, which is a very slim decision, 5-4, so it can be flipped very easily.
Yeah, I mean, do you do have overturning of Roe v. Wade really?
This one I think can be overturned even faster because I mean, I know we're not supposed to discuss that case now, but some of the reasoning by Roberts and things like that is just beyond crazy, okay? It's like, I don't even know where they got their brain for. But anyway, that's for another episode, okay? Then, of course, the one other thing I want to mention, of course, is right at the beginning of their founding, they have two very influential figures. Now, of course, Washington position is kind of like everyone respected him, but what happens after he leaves, right? So you have Alexander Hamilton, who is basically the father of our economy. Then you have Thomas Jefferson, and these two. But the one thing they really fought was over, what is the extent of federal power. But eventually, I mean, to cut the long story short, Jefferson won, and the states have more autonomy. And it's crazy, right? I mean, you think about it, every state in US have their own election rule. It's both good and bad, right?
It is.
Yeah, but that's the thing, that their decentralization is pretty astounding. And anyway, we come to the last point today, and it's really like is there anything we can learn? Because I think if people really look in depth, maybe there's something to learn. If they take away the prejudice, if every time they see Trump, they don't think of the orange man and things like that, then they may be able to see some legitimate policy, right?
Definitely. I mean, he is all about basically helping the Americans first. I mean, even with the Iran war, I mean, you see so clearly that, I mean, even just with one guy that needed rescuing, I think they were not hesitant at all, and they really execute such a brilliant rescue plan. So I felt like, on that note, I mean, if we were stranded somewhere else, I don't know if our government would be saving us or not, So I felt like that part, they really exhibit that sort of like, we protect our rights first. So I felt like that's the core, the essence of Make America Great Again. But it's not to the extent of what we have been thinking, like, as in being an isolationist, we don't care about the state of all the other nations, our allies and things like that. So they are, I mean, they have been very strategic. I felt like that part is the part where we could learn a bit more. I mean, what benefits the nation? What helps the nation to grow to the next level? So I felt like that part, if people could just overlook the orange man, I think people could actually gain a lot of, like, the wisdom, the brilliance in executing like certain business deal and things like that. I felt like the nation's economy could have like a turnaround.
Yeah, very, very interesting you mentioned all these things, because like when it comes to the challenge of Malaysia, right? I mean, the last few episodes we've been talking about, I mean, especially with the Iran war, is it really I mean, of course, started off with tariff last year, then with the Iran war, it really exposed how the how fragile our economy is, and we are not as secure as we think we are, and so many people are surprised to know that we are actually a net importer of crude oil. And all these things is because we kept going back to entitlement, we kept talking about the entitlement mindset in this show. And I mean, just look at some of the more so-called progressive writing in Malaysia, and when they criticize US, on USAID and things like that, it's like, I mean, what gives you the right to say a nation must support us? I mean, you think about it, it's so ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, look, even ASEAN, right? So, look at Myanmar and things like that, nations in great difficulty. Are the other ASEAN country helping? No. Everyone is like on your own. And why must America pay for the rest of the world when their own people are not having job and they lost all the manufacturing and things like that, when they were swamped by all the migrants? So I just find this kind of double thinking, very, very entitlement, and you can't do this, and then when US is doing certain things, then they start to complain. So I don't know how to, can people wake up? And I think even with such a tremendous success or Trump's administration. But of course, they have a lot of opposition because even within their country, there's a group of people who wants to go, the Mamdani gang and things like that. These are like AOC 2.0, it's like even more extreme because they are, I mean, for lack of a better word, they are really like naked socialists already. They're not even hiding their true intention. I mean, previously people can still kind of package a little bit. We are like union. Did you see the other day? I think G7 had a meeting, right? And so G7 historically will invite Brazil because Brazil is one of the huge nations. So Lula went, President Lula. And so there was a round table where I think the EU president was kind of, I think German chancellor, and then suddenly the EU president was like, well, President Lula, you run as a leftist socialist, right? That's your platform, right? Like kind of challenging. He said, no, I'm union, I'm union background. I'm not a leftist socialist. Then he said, the leftist is on the retreat because that is, you see, Trump winning is a sign. So, I mean, it's like, who are you trying to kid, right? So they are like people trying to pretend, because I think they know that in the age of MAGA and Trump, being overt socialist can cause. I mean, look at Latin America. Did you follow all the recent election? Colombia, Peru, who else? I mean, all the conservative government has been winning.
Exactly.
And some people say it's linked to the closing of the tap of USAID. But the other thing about what Malaysia can learn, very interestingly, is, I mean, this is the last point, and we'll move on. Remember, there's a whole thing about, the bill in Malaysia to separate the Attorney General and Public Prosecutor Chief. And I think some of the PKR, the Kasab, no, I want to call them Kasab. They're not Kasab. They kind of left on their own volition, right? But Won Chen kind of was telling a reporter that he won't vote for that. That day he mentioned something very interesting because these are the British elite influence people and said, maybe we should have American-style Senate confirmation because he wanted Parliament to have more. I mean, because William Blackstone is the one who argued the theory supremacy of Parliament, but in Malaysia, Parliament is probably the weakest branch. Like they call it the rubber stamp, right?
Exactly.
So now because you're so weak, you are thinking we want power like Senate. But Senate confirmation is kind of ingenious, right?
It definitely is. I mean, I've never seen so tedious the process.
It used to be not so partisan and not so political because actually the wording of the constitution say consent and confirm. So your job is to make sure that the president is not appointing some lunatic. That's the job. But then it has become so partisan. I mean, look at Kavanaugh and even Amy Barrett and things like that. I mean, no wonder they became crazy once they get into the seat. But anyway, that's another episode. So I think the next episode, maybe we'll look at the 3 Scotters cases. Kind of, remember we talk about the birthright case.
Yep.
We have the Trump versus Slaughter, which is administrative executive power, which many people say is maybe the most important Supreme Court case in the last 70 years. Then we have the transgender case. So maybe we do that the next episode.
Sure.
Okay, so I think our times is up. So we shall say happy 250th birthday to America. So we'll do a few episodes to kind of commemorate this. Okay, until next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.